Thank you for joining us on another edition of Against the Current. I'm Dan Proft, co-host of Chicago's Morning Answer, 5 to 9 a.m. Monday to Friday on AM 560 with Amy Jacobson. And our guest on this edition is retiring state senator, unfortunately, Kyle McCarter from downstate Lebanon, Illinois, Republican, Metro East area down by St. Louis. Kyle, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So you've been in the State Senate, the General Assembly, for about the past 8 years. What, not having fun anymore? Why are you not running again?
I've never been a quitter at anything, and I guess that's why it's tough for me to term limit myself. But I'm convinced that term limits is one of the best things we can do to address politics today. I understand I perhaps could still do a lot of good while I was there, but and I'm not sure we're going to have a law that says we're going to limit terms. But
so when you
I'll be an example of that.
When you say self-imposed term limit, you said when you ran you would serve 8 years and then leave, and that's what you've done, which is relatively unprecedented.
And people have asked me to stay. And I could stay, and I could continue to get elected to this Senate seat, very conservative area.
Yeah. And
I believe the people trust me. I could do that, but
people trust you. You've basically run without opponents.
Well, and that's true. But there's other people that can step up and do this, and I think it's important that this not become a career for people. And I started in the manufacturing business. I'm still in the manufacturing business, and I've kept it going the whole time. And I think that's important.
So, which is more difficult, to be a conservative reform Republican in Illinois, or to be a manufacturer?
Well, being a manufacturer in Illinois is a challenge because of this environment, this political and economic environment that we've got. I mean, it's very, very difficult. And being 19 miles from the border of Missouri, I have options.
Yeah.
I bought a business in Missouri.
I assume
moved it in, and in 1 week, and so I know how to move it out.
Well, and I assume you've seen colleagues in your industry go the other way.
One after the other, and friends. I mean, not just businesses, but friends. I mean, the song "All My Exes Live in Texas." Well.
All your exes live in Missouri?
Well, my son's living in Texas, and with our new grandbaby. And believe me, I'm getting a little pressure from my wife to not be as far away. And then when I go down there, I could stay anywhere I want. There's a host of families that have left Illinois from the Metro East down there, and they say, stay at our house.
Yeah. And
they're trying to convince me, to leave as well. So it's a tough environment to be in, and where you don't get support, you tend to get instead punishment, for doing well, and
both as a legislator and as a manufacturer.
Well, exactly. I'd never been audited by the Employment Security, IDES, for my partner and myself, total of 30 years. Until I became senator, and was audited twice, and there's like the independent contractor law in this state is impossible to meet the guidelines for this state, and people don't understand that law in itself has run hundreds, thousands of businesses out of this state, and I've been on the receiving end of that.
So I mean, let's just talk honestly for the benefit of our audience. You're a guy that wasn't always the most popular guy in the Republican caucus in the Senate. And I wonder what that was like. I mean, you've partnered with other conservative reform legislators like freshman Dan McConkey, and you two together introduced a balanced budget without a tax increase this past term. So there was an option. It didn't have to go the way it went.
Nope.
You introduced one alternative that balanced without a tax increases. But
and we filed that.
Yeah, no,
it wasn't just some idea that we had. We actually filed that in with legislation.
But it didn't get the light of day.
No,
because people aren't interested.
But there's no excuse for anyone to say that we could not have done it.
Right.
They may not have had the will to do it. They may not have wanted to make all those tough decisions to do it.
Yeah.
But the numbers did add up.
But before we get to the particulars of that proposal that was filed. That's an actual thing that people could have leveled up and debated and decided upon. I mean, especially for people that are looking to potentially run for state legislative office or are running for state legislative office. You know, frankly, the courage to be unpopular down there. It's easy to say, and everybody says, I'm willing to do the right thing, even if it makes me unpopular among the lobbyists and among my caucus mates and among the powers that be in Springfield. But when it comes down to it, very few are willing to actually do that, and you did.
Well, I think any legislator coming into Illinois has a choice of going down two paths. They can kind of feel the environment out and try to get away with not taking a position and not offending the special interest groups that have the ability to spend a lot of money to take you out of office, whether that be public unions, whether that be even for-profit, concerns, whether that be even Advance Illinois, who has now become a power broker as far as education. I mean, these groups, any one of them,
including the Senate Republican Caucus,
them too, and I think it's public that I've not paid my dues to the the Republican Senate Caucus because when they put somebody up against me in a primary, I didn't feel that I really needed to pay for their support, and so I have not done that. But you have this choice of whether you're going to go down one way or the other, or you can actually do what's right and provide good governance. Because I believe that good governance is good politics. I believe if you do the right thing politically, it's going to work out, especially in this environment today. I mean, we've seen what happened, with the president. I mean, there were people that stood up and said, "Listen, I'm tired of it. I've had enough. I don't care about your party. I care about whether you got enough guts to do the right thing, and we're going to back you." And I think if you do the right thing, that's good politics. And it costs you a lot less to win in a race because I think a lot of times folks are having to pay big money to convince people that you're something that you really aren't.
Yeah.
And I think it's better just to be who you are. Not everybody in my district agrees with all the things that all my stances. They don't. And they will tell me weekly, "I don't agree with you 100%, but I appreciate you standing up for what you're doing."
Yeah, I mean, the underappreciated asset of authenticity. And I'll tell you, I mean, I don't know that I've spoken about this publicly because I just haven't had the opportunity, but when I ran for governor in 2010, I remember having a fundraiser in Decatur, at a bar in Decatur.
Right.
And it was, I was a long shot candidate, as it turned out. Mostly based on my disagreeable personality. And but somebody came to my fundraiser in Decatur, and literally somebody singular.
Yeah.
And it was Kyle McCarter.
Yeah.
And
I remember.
Yeah, right. It was an
quite intimate.
It was an intimate affair. Yeah, it was nice. It was more of a dinner with
just a few of us.
Yeah, than a fundraiser. But it was something that sticks with me as anybody goes through being a candidate. Those kind of moments stick with you because it was somebody who was in office at the time, who gave me a sense of legitimacy to say, maybe the powers that be don't like you, and maybe the financiers don't think you're viable or don't care about you because you're not viable or whatever they think. But maybe you've got some good ideas, and maybe you're saying things that need to be said, have needed to be said for a long time, and you're the only one saying them. And so I at least respect that enough to show up and encourage you. And I always appreciated that. And I try and pay that forward with other candidates in similar situations, and also provide the support for them that nobody provided me, no support was provided me that's commensurate to that. And I'm sure you've had the experience as well throughout the annals of your political career. But that is something too. I mean, part of the problem, it seems to me, in the Republican Party is we don't say to people who are principled, that are committed to the fight, that are willing to charge up a hill, that are willing to take on the established powers in both parties in Springfield that have destroyed the state's economy, and say no more. And you were willing to do that, not just for yourself and not just to tout yourself, but for other people, even other people that had marginal chances of being impactful back in 2009, 2010 when I was running. And I think that says something about you, which is why I've always appreciated your leadership in the General Assembly.
Well, think about how arrogant it is for a party to pick the candidate. I mean, primaries are good things. I mean, a lot of good things can come out of it. I mean, primaries make your general, candidate a lot better than they would have been if they hadn't have gone through that.
Yeah.
How are they going to know themselves? How are they going to know their weaknesses? How are they going to know what the people really want to hear, and what's important to them? And for the party to pick the candidate is such an offensive thing. I mean, it really irritates me.
Well, it kind of goes against our stated first principles, right? The idea we believe in competition, providing the best good, the best service,
Right.
the best result, except when it comes to primaries.
Right.
Because there's only one person that could ever be a state senator or a state rep or a congressman or a
Right.
governor.
And then they say, well, you don't have a chance.
Right.
No, if I put my name on the ballot, I have a chance. Right?
Right.
Now, I may have a chance of losing really big too, but I still have a chance. And so I try to encourage candidates. I mean, I've been working, knowing that I wasn't going to be here forever, I have tried to invest my time into some people, business people, younger business people that I believe would be good candidates. And it's taken a little while, some of them a couple years before they would step up to run. But I've tried to invest in them because they're going to have to step up. I can't do this. I can't get this done. I mean, there's going to have to be more people step up and take the stands that I've taken and to really change the state.
Well, and you've put yourself on the line too. I mean, it's not just running in the safe Republican state Senate district. Last cycle, you ran against John Shimkus, a very popular incumbent Southern Illinois Republican congressman, somebody who is a West Point grad.
Yes.
And you lost that race. And what was the lesson learned from that?
That when you run it, well, the establishment is they are organized, and there's a lot of fear. And I tell you, in that race, I had very little help within the state of Illinois. In fact, I had to go out of the state of Illinois for all my contractors. I had to go pretty much out of the state for my donors, and they didn't like me stepping up to do that. But again, I had a chance, and I felt that was the right thing to do.
Well, and I mean, just to I mean, and I don't have anything personally against John Shipkus, but I mean, let's just contrast the record. You're somebody, you made a term limits pledge at the state Senate level, and you're keeping it. He made a term limits pledge when he ran for Congress, and he didn't keep it.
It's a very good comparison. I think it's very clear, and to me it's not personal. Although that race got very personal, with your, it's easier for me as a candidate to get over all the negative things that took place and were said, and all the money that was spent to say things that weren't accurate and weren't true. It's a little different for your wife.
Yeah, well, of course.
It takes a little longer for them to get over it. But
no matter how much she agrees with the personal attacks leveled against you.
Yeah, that's
Even
right.
still.
Well, but I won't admit to those.
Yeah, right.
No, never. But I think it's it was costly. It was a costly race for me personally. Is it worth what I learned? I'm sure. I believe that everything you do builds for the future. I believe my 8 years on the county board built for the state. I believe that 9 years in the state is going to build for something else, and I think those experiences prepare you, make you a little tougher, make you a little better and a little sharper.
Well, I mean, to some extent, it's like being a political entrepreneur, right? I mean, that's what you are professionally, and it's like you have to take risks to get ahead in politics too. And it seems to me one of my consistent criticisms of the Illinois Republican Party over the decades has been, for a party that has so little, we're awfully risk averse. And it seems to me you've got a lot of people that have a little perch and they're willing to protect that at all costs rather than take the proper political risks,
right,
the calculated political risks to actually seek majorities, to seek control of a legislative agenda.
Yeah. Well, our leaders, Leader Virginia as well, her famous closing remark caucuses was keep your powder dry. And just sit back. Let's see what happens here,
react.
and let's see if we can get away with not really taking a stance and be on the right side here. That's not the way to do this. I mean, and here's the thing: if you don't have principles, maybe that's a good idea. If you don't have any principles, maybe you better just feel your way out and see if you can get out of it. But I think, again, good governance is good politics, and I believe if you stand on those principles and you're bold about them, so people, even if they don't agree with you, they're going to trust you.
So has the first principle in the Senate Republican caucus, which you've been a part of for the last 8 years, it seems to me this is the first principle: political survival. That's the first principle.
Well,
survival at all costs.
Well, you wouldn't think so with our numbers.
Well, right, but it turns out right. Yeah, right. I mean, you could have your caucus meetings in a phone booth if they still existed.
Yeah, exactly.
So super minority, right? But for those in the super minority, I just want to hold on to my thing.
Yeah.
But is that fair to say that the first principle has been political survival, and that first principle has led to a permanent super minority?
Well, I believe so. I don't think we've not been aggressive enough. We've not taken our message directly to the people. We've sat back, kept our powder dry, and I think it's really caused a lot of problems.
How was the balanced budget proposal that you and Dan McCarter submitted received in the Republican caucus?
Not real well. I think you can see by the number of co-sponsors. There's very, very.
What was that number?
Other than Dan and myself, I would say maybe 2 others signed on to a few bills. The less, risky bills like the local government consolidation and things like that. They weren't signing on to a pension cost shift. They weren't signing on to limiting managed care administration expenses to 9%, which we had that little contest yesterday in the Senate. I mean, those tough bills where you had to explain yourself, and I think a lot of times guys just don't want to have to explain them. They don't want to have to really go into the detail of the policy to tell people why it's a good thing. They'd rather just say, "I'm against this. I'm for this." They don't want to take the time. Now, some
they want to take a position, not make an argument.
Right. Some don't even have some don't have the ability to make the argument.
I concede your point. I've listened to them.
I mean, but those that understand it just don't want to take the risk to do that, and take the time to do that. And I think there's a tremendous amount of protection with your constituents the more open you are, and the more you educate them as to what's happened. And I guess I've really just realized that in the last year. I mean, the more I lay everything out about a budget, how you make a budget, people are very supportive. And they,
Do you think it's a matter that, you run a manufacturing concern, that so few people in the state Senate or the General Assembly have ever actually had to make a budget? Is that part of it?
I think it's part of it. But then there's this. I think people have said for years, "Oh, well, this Illinois, budget is so complex. There's only 1 or 2 people that understand it." Well, that's bull.
Right.
That's just a way for them to say, "Listen, don't really dig into this because we don't want you to find what's really happening." And somebody said, "Well, why we don't need term limits because it's going to take you 6-7 years to really figure out how to do things." Well, if it takes you 6-7 years to figure out how to do things, you're the wrong guy. I mean,
the system's too complicated, right? I mean, it's the idea
that.
Well,
but I think they say that so they don't want the citizens to know what they're actually doing.
Right.
The citizens can figure this out. I mean, we could have solved this budget crisis. I could have picked 3 or 4 guys. Give me 10 guys from my district. Put us in a room for 3 days on a weekend, and I guarantee you we come up with a budget.
We've talked to Dan McCarter on this program about that balanced budget proposal that you guys offered, but give us some of the highlights just for repetition.
It's one. There's no tax increases.
Right. Well, that's
and
a highlight.
So out of respect for the citizens, I think you got to start there, right? Because we saw what happened in the last one. It did nothing. All it did is produce deficits. We were $36 billion. We received $36 billion and no better off. So what we did is we took 10% across the board cuts. That did not include Medicaid and did not include universities or K through 12 education. K through 12 education, we kept it the same. We cut higher ed pretty good. We gave them a pretty good haircut.
This again requires making an argument rather than those surrender Republicans who voted for the tax increases, many of whom had a college, a state college or a university in their district, who said, well, but I gotta protect dear alma mater. And it turns out, again, you gotta make an argument, you gotta present the facts to people so that you can bring them along. Illinois provides twice as much money per capita as the national average in higher ed, and yet tuition, because it's being subsidized by the state, is 25 to 50% higher with respect to Illinois state colleges and universities as compared to their conference peers. So wait a second. I mean, it's time to give colleges, state colleges, and universities an ultimatum. Either you bring your tuition down in line with our surrounding states and the conference peers to make it affordable for Illinois families, or we're going to cut you.
Yeah.
I mean, what's wrong with that?
Well, the best example is the U of I. U of I has a $5.2 billion budget. Okay?
And they have the second highest in-state tuition in the Big Ten.
That's right. And so, and they said, they came to us on appropriations and said, we've cut $120 million. Who cares?
And that was just the university.
I mean, let's just
salary.
like saying a family that's making $53,000 a year, and they said, you got a budget problem. Okay, we'll look at it. We'll look at it. And they come back and they say, well, cut $120.
Right.
Really? You can't do better than that? I mean, these folks, they can handle this. They can do this, but they don't want to. They're not willing to change their culture. They're not willing to shift the paradigm to what's good for the taxpayers.
Because they know they can demagogue the issue and cower the state legislators and the state legislature by saying, U of I, you're not going to fund U of I? This is the the crown jewel of the state university and college system.
Right.
Well, it is. It's a great school. It's a great engineering school, and so on and so forth. But that doesn't mean that you should be able to charge 50% more than University of Iowa charges Iowa families, or University of Indiana University charges Hoosier families, and so forth. Well, what the hell is that?
No.
You should be, if you're the crown jewel, then you should be making the crown jewel accessible to middle-income families with talented kids who can do the academic work required to be a U of I undergrad. Right. And they're not doing that.
Instead, they go to Mizzou.
Or China.
Yeah, right.
Well, U of I goes to China to recruit,
recruit
families playing full freight.
Because they pay full board.
Right.
They pay full board, and you got to remember, this is a 50% gross margin business. Education is.
Yeah.
Now, not necessarily for Illinois because their administrative costs are so high. But in most states where they've got their administrative costs under control, it's about a 50% gross business. And so if you bring somebody in 100%, that's money you can give away all over the place.
But it all comes back to the same thing. It's like, this is telling the truth. This is telling Illinois families what time it is. And people don't want to hear it. And people are afraid to say it because of the backlash. I'm just little old me, one state legislator, one state rep or state senator, and this is U of I. And I can't expose U of I in terms of what they're actually doing. Why the heck not? If you're not willing to do that, then you shouldn't be in the state legislature.
Yeah, no, not too many people want to take them on. But that was part of our budget. The best part of our budget was the spending cap for 7 years.
Yeah.
We borrowed the money to pay back the vendors up to a 60-day period. 60 days out is okay. We can carry people. If people are at 60 days and they know they're getting their money at 60 days, they're fine.
They're also not getting the 1% per month.
We took that prompt pay away from them as well.
Right.
And in fact, we got a little hearing on that. Didn't go anywhere, but that 12% interest rate's got to go away. So we paid them off, took that prompt pay away. And then the big thing is we froze the spending for 7 years and said that we're not going to go over the $33.5 billion that we had coming in, but anything that comes in over that during that period, 25% goes to education, 25% goes to infrastructure, roads, bridges, and another 25% goes to pensions, and then the rest of the rainy day fund. and
all the big ticket
the
systems in
big
state
ticket item
government.
that we need to reform, that we've got to get control over. So what that does, it ties the hands of the legislature so they can't go spending on every little frivolous project there is. And think about this. This is good politics, because then legislators can go back and say, look what I did. Because I didn't spend, money that I didn't have, I put this much into education. I put this much into roads and bridges. It makes a lot of sense. And we would have taken ourselves out of debt, and it would have been the real discipline that this state needs.
But
now, I know this is all, this is
Yeah.
like a fairy tale to these guys.
Exactly.
And they laugh, they thought it was pretty funny. But I will tell you the other side, President Cullerton, Dan and I had numerous meetings with him, and they like parts of it.
Yeah.
Now, they knew how they couldn't get it past their liberal members, but they know it makes sense.
Yeah, but you might as well put on your little footy pajamas and have a slumber party, because this is all just silliness, right? I mean, that's what this is, because the reality is, if you're not pouring more money into K through 12, then you're not even in the conversation. Despite the fact, and this is real time, Republicans and Democrats starting from the same premise: more money into K-12 is a synonym for better outcomes. And in the last 20 years, in real dollars adjusted for inflation, we've increased total spend on K through 12 education by 74%, while enrollment has creeped up 6%. So we've increased spend at 12 times the rate of enrollment growth, and student performance is flat according to NAEP testing and other metrics.
Right.
But if you're not in the game of saying, no, you're not putting more money into K through 12, I'm putting more money into K through 12, then you're out of the game.
Well, it's because those that want to put more money in love kids, and those that don't want to put more money in don't
Correct.
love
Why
kids.
do you
right?
hate kids, Kyle
Isn't it
McCarter?
that easy?
Why do you hate children?
That's the way it is. And so we kept it the same. I mean, the governor had an increase of $40 million. We didn't even do that. And that's exactly where we're at right now, talking about adequacy, talking about are we not funded enough? I mean, are we underfunded?
$20,000 in 2016 dollars, $20,000 per pupil, which is exponentially more than some of the best private schools, not in Illinois, in the country, spend per pupil in Illinois.
And that's what I've been asking the people in my district to compare to. Go to your best parochial school, Althoff, Mater Dei, some of the great schools in the South, in Breeze.
Yeah.
And you know what they are? They're $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, and you compare that to the state average of 12.
Why do you hate now? You hate teachers too. You hate kids and teachers. I mean, this is. Do you ever just like throw up your hands and want to kind of just scream in your office or in your district and say, "So I'm trying to make a math equation work. I'm trying to connect inputs to outputs. I'm trying to assess return on investment," and in response, I get back, "If you don't write blank checks, you don't like kids and you don't like teachers." It is so juvenile, it is so anti-intellectual, it is so disingenuous, and yet the Republican Party, I would say, lets the left get away with it. And many Republicans who make those same arguments.
But I think you're giving those in charge way too much credit, because I think the people, my constituents, they know how to look at this. They don't have to be told what to do by some leader in education with a master's degree or a doctorate what's best for their kids.
Yeah.
They don't need that. They can see that in Germantown, they spend $6,700 on a student. And when they look at the $15,378 in Chicago, they think, where's the equity here? Germantown is an award-winning school.
And what the hell are you spending all that money on that we're getting done, better for less than half the cost?
Right. Well, and then even a bigger insult is with Senate Bill 1, they get $75 more.
Yeah.
I mean, that's going to, at what year is that going to bring them to the same level as funding? This is a grab for about $3.5 billion to commit that to the state and to the citizens and make them pay and increase taxes over the years through. I think, why do you have Ralph Marteri on this, this panel of experts pushing Senate Bill 1? Because of his progressive tax increase. That's why he's there.
And that's what's coming if we get a Governor J.B. Pritzker or Governor Chris Kennedy. That's what's coming.
That's what's coming to pay for this big education plan. And it's not going to do any. It's not going to change the results. It's not going to change the outcomes.
What about the regionalism in this state that has afflicted the state from time immemorial? Certainly since I've been around, which is the last 2 decades. Southern Illinois versus Chicago. Basically the rest of the state versus Chicago, and this kind of, what I find as a Chicago denizen to be a little bit silly and juvenile and unproductive. If we could just make Chicago its own state, or if we could just secede from Chicago and this and that. Chicago's been part of Illinois since 1818. It's not going anywhere. You're not going to secede. You're not going to kick Chicago out. So now that we've gotten past that temper tantrum, now what are we going to do with the state as it's actually constituted? And can we have that conversation to kind of focus people's attention rather than to play this kind of cheap regionalism game? It's sort of like cheap populism of any other sort, isn't it?
Well, but here.
I ask you as a Southern Illinois.
I get it. I get it every week. And I'll be doing my my daily Facebook Live from Chicago today. And believe me, I'll hear about it. Well, by just being here.
Yeah, but it's not to say that Chicago deserves to be bailed out year after year. That's not the same thing. But it's to say, look, Chicago's part of the state. So now that we've started from that premise, now what do we do to make sure that this makes sense, what we're doing with big ticket systems in state government like K through 12 education?
Well, I think let's just look at the numbers. Let's look at the numbers and let's look at the outcomes. Let's look at it pragmatically. No need to get emotional about the whole thing. Yeah. Let's look at what Germantown's doing right. And let's face it, a lot of the factors in education, they're going to change it, or they're going to change outcomes and really give us the results they want. We can't buy it.
Correct.
We can't pay to get dads to stay home and stay with their family and be with their kids. We can't pay to make that happen. We can't pay to get parents to get involved in their kids' education.
And the other thing is, where money matters in K through 12 education? It's not on the spend side, K through 12, past a certain threshold, which we're way past. It's household income. So you want to have an impact on a child's education, grow their parents' take-home earnings.
Right.
Because that has the greatest correlative, that's the greatest correlation. It's household income and child outcomes. It's not for people spend in child incomes, and people don't make that distinction.
Well, I said this when the governor was running for election, when I had a lot of social conservatives in the South that were asking me why I would support this governor.
Yeah.
And I said, what has been done in this state by the Democrats in charge is fiscally immoral. And the damage that it has done to families is as great as these other issues.
Why don't Republicans, so that's such a key point, I want to stop you there because this is an underappreciated point. Wrong, fiscally irresponsible, blah, 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 everybody's a fiscal conservative. It's a morality question. It's a values question. And the left, tiny dancer up here, is happy to speak in the parlance of morals and values. We're not. That what they've done with their fiscal choices is immoral. Immoral. So in terms of appealing to people's moral code, their sense of what is right and what is wrong, we're saying is not that this is not going to work. We're saying what they're doing is wrong. It is morally wrong. And why don't we speak with that kind of clarity?
Well, and when we can tell stories that prove it too, we can just say, listen, the net result of your failure to take on the special interest, to change workers' comp, to really make this pension system affordable to the taxpayers, the net result, because you failed to take on these big ticket items in this state, is that I have to travel 12 and a half hours to see my grandkid instead of 12 hours across town, 12 minutes across town. The net result is they're gone.
Yeah.
They've left. They've left my church. They've left my community. My own kids are living outside the state. Their choices, their failure and lack of courage to take on these issues and change the political and economic environment in this state is what has caused people to leave. And I think we've got to tell those stories and say, listen, this is the net result of what you did. Don't tell me what your party says. Don't tell you chose not to take it on, and this is the net result. And you're hurting families. You're hurting my families. You're hurting my communities. We've got to make this. We've got to tell those stories. And I think if we do, we can be a lot more successful.
And I don't think people in Chicago, although it's being visited upon Chicago. I mean, Chicago's at its lowest population level since 1920, and who's leading the exodus? Middle income to lower middle income black families. That's who's left in the last decade because they want to get out of here too. Nobody who's a peaceful, productive person wants to live in a shooting gallery on the west or the south side of Chicago. Yeah. So it's being visited upon Chicago as well. But I think in Chicago Metro, the suburban communities, there's a lack of appreciation for the plight of so many communities in central and southern Illinois, particularly those who have choices right across the border, as people like in Lake County do here, Wisconsin, or on the east side of the state have in Indiana, or the west side of the state have in Iowa. But you see it every day, and it's a different perspective. But it's nonetheless real, and it's a different demographic, but it's nonetheless real. And sometimes it's not a different demographic in places like East St. Louis.
Yeah, a neighbor of mine named Skip Brown, African-American gentleman, business owner, told me just yesterday. He said, I love living in Illinois. I'm just not sure I can afford living in Illinois any longer. And, that gentleman makes Illinois a better place. Having him here is good for us. It's good for everyone in that community. It's good for young people that are looking up to him as a mentor. And you take him out of this, and you've done a tremendous disservice to the people of this state.
Right. I want to emulate that guy, right? But now he's gone.
That's right.
And so where are the mentors? Where are the kind of intellectual and spiritual leaders of these communities? Then they leave just like anybody else for greener pastures.
Right.
Better, different mission fields.
And you've got some people that are stuck.
Yes.
You've got
a lot of people that are stuck.
You've got the agriculture community that just can't pick up and move. I mean, I can put everything I've got in about 10 semis, and I'm in exit 19B. I can go 19 miles down the road and go somewhere else. I brought it in. I know how to take it out.
Yeah.
But if you're in agriculture, that's different. You're not able to do that.
And a point of order, agribusiness, the number one business in Illinois. I mean, these family farms and others in agribusiness are part of the backbone of our state's economy.
Right, and we should be
a significant part.
We should be supporting them and promoting that and be known for that throughout the nation. Instead, all we do is penalize people.
So when you think about this going forward, and you think about, you mentioned Governor Rauner, his performance 2.5 years in, as somebody who's, a lame duck. You can speak freely now. What's your assessment of Governor Rauner's performance as the guy who promised to shake up Springfield and turn around Illinois?
I think it was... I think what he said he was going to do was what a lot of people expected him to do. I think there's a lot of people that are asking why he really hasn't done that. I think he's got a chance to redeem himself, but he's going to have to start taking some risk, and he's going to have to start connecting with people.
What hasn't he done that he should have done to bring people along, even where he was not as successful as he wanted to be because of the impediments endemic to the system?
Well, is it really about bringing people along? I mean, there's these people that he's across the table with. He's never going to bring them along. Right. The only way for him to win this is to win with the support of the people. The only way for him to win this is to connect with the people that are fed up. And
so here's my criticism. for too long, for much of his 2.5 years, he's played the inside game with a government class that he cannot win, to the exclusion of the 95% of the people who exist outside of that system that he can win, and we're counting on him to win, and we're counting on him to leverage to impose his will on the government class types. And he hasn't consummated that opportunity.
Well, and I've said it before. If it was me, I think in hindsight, the best thing to do would be, the week after the inauguration, just shut the place down, and say this is what we're going to have to do to change this, the environment of this state, and until we get these structural reforms, we're not going forward.
So you think that. And it's interesting because this is something I've argued, so I don't want to put the words in your mouth, but my argument has been what Rauner really needs is his siege on Madison moment. He needs his Scott Walker moment where he stands athwart the public sector unions and says, no more. We don't exist as spare parts for you to liquidate as needed. We're going to change the system. We're going to change the obligations it imposes, the money flow, who gets to make spending decisions across all of these big ticket systems. That's what we're going to do. And I'm going to do it from a much more difficult place than Scott Walker did it with Republican majorities in his state legislature. I'm going to do it with super minorities, at least at the start, in both houses of the state legislature in Illinois. If he would have said that from the beginning and fought in furtherance of that, I think he'd be in a much different place as we stand here in mid-2017 than he is. That's my impression. I don't know what your opinion is.
Yeah, I suppose I would not have negotiated the way he did. I would have never said, I will give you a tax increase if as long as you give me reforms. The tax increase is an insult to the people that I represent. That's an insult. I'm not showing them the respect that they deserve to tell them that.
Here, my thing on a tax increase is, you know what it says? It's your fault.
Right.
You're not giving enough. We have to take more from you because you're not holding up your end.
It's not our responsibility.
It's not us. It's you.
Not because we control our spending.
It's you. You didn't give enough, so now
right.
we have to extract more from you. And I don't know why he didn't make that case, because, boy, it puts those Democrats, including those downstate Democrats, in a real trick box, doesn't it?
Yeah. No, I think he never should have said that. I think he should have held his ground, and I think the people of this state would have supported him.
So if you're giving advice to Governor Rauner, not that he'll take your advice any more than he takes mine, but he's got 16 months to get this ship righted. I mean, he's not up against indomitable candidates. I mean, J.B. Pritzker, Chris Kennedy, Dan Biss, these are all different iterations of the same policy program that has destroyed the state and made it the worst governed state in the history of America. But what do you tell Governor Rauner? What is the path forward?
I would tell him that he needs to articulate as clearly as possible the principles that this state needs to turn it around, and to take that message to the people. Now, and take it directly to the people, and look right into their face and tell them this is what we need, and this is what it's going to translate into for your family. This is how it's going to keep your family together. This is how it's going to keep your kids in this state. But this is what has to happen in order for us to be successful. And if he does that, well enough, I think he can get reelected.
One bit of business I want to make sure we get to is, because it's so important that this tag conservatives, they don't appreciate the arts, they're not intellectual, they aren't interested in their fellow man, and so it's always good to profile people who exemplify the antithesis of that accusation, and you and your wife are a good example of that antithesis. The work that you've done in Kenya, and why Kenya, what's the work, and what's the status of said work?
Well, for right out of college, I was engaged, married, had my first child, graduated from college. I mean, it was we didn't wait too long for anything. But we
Thank God you had your wife as a chaperone.
Oh yes,
Yes.
yeah. So we moved to Kenya and lived there for 2 years. I built a medical clinic that started. That work started. And my mother and father together, we co-founded that work in Kenya, East Africa, in a place called Tharaka. There was a cholera epidemic. My dad was importing tetracycline. Pretty much saved this community from this cholera epidemic. I came in after he left and built a medical clinic. And lived out in the bush for 2 years, slept under a tree for a year until the clinic was built. It was, everybody said, why'd you do it? And I said, well, nobody else was willing to go, so we went. But that started a good thing, and for 30 years, somebody in my family's been there. Now it's K through 8 school. We've got 36 orphans that actually live there on campus, and we've got 100 others that we take care of. We've got a medical clinic. We take care of 45 families that are HIV positive. We protect many girls who are in jeopardy of being sold and trafficked in that area. And so my parents retired 6 years ago, so we took that back over. We raised all the funds for it from friends and family, and we've got a staff of 40 over there. And my wife's there about three to 4 months out of the year. I'm there we go back and forth. I go 2 to 3 times a year. And those folks have become our family. And we've got kids now who've graduated from college. We've got a lot of those young people have come back and working in the community. And so, and we've been able to save a lot of lives. And I don't talk about it a lot. I just, it's something we do. We've done very quietly, but it's that exposure and understanding of what takes place in East Africa, and especially in Kenya, that has put me in a position to possibly, be appointed the ambassador. So I've got the congressional delegation has recommended me, and I'm still kind of waiting to see if that can happen. Don't have any assurance that it will happen, but it would be that's one of my options right now. That, as well as running for Congress again in the 15th.
So if you were, whether you're ultimately nominated and confirmed as the ambassador, or you just continue to do this philanthropic work, what's your vision for your work in Kenya, this many years in?
Oh, well, let me just say, as far as in Kenya, the United States has missed tremendous opportunity in the last 8 years. One, they got involved in social programs and politics where they shouldn't have. And it's not too good when you pick the wrong horse.
Right.
And but we've missed opportunities to invest in that country, and at the same time produce jobs here in the United States. One of the things that I propose to them is actually helping them with their coal-fired power plant and power transmission lines, which is one of my businesses, and we deal in that industry. But in order to train their people to deal with this emerging source of power, and in return, we get one thing, and that is the right to sell them coal from Southern Illinois. And you talk about a win-win for politicians. This is something we should have done 5 years ago when this huge project went online, but we missed it. And so it's the business background, politically knowing how to at least walk around and avoid problems, and bring jobs to the United States. That's one of the things that I put forward in my proposal.
So this is kind of like the confluence of rewarding all these different experiences, as if you could bring them all together to help people simultaneously in Southern Illinois as well as Kenya, and that's the beauty of capitalism.
I believe that's what happens. See, I believe that through your experiences, because you started by saying, "What did I learn with the congressional run?" I've learned a lot throughout this whole thing, and I do really think that God just helps build you to be, for the next level of authority, if you're willing to just work hard. And just put your head down, do the job in the county, do the job in the state, do my job in Kenya, And I believe that he prepares you for that next level of authority that you can not abuse, but use to help people.
He is retiring State Senator Kyle McCarter, perhaps future ambassador to Kenya, Kyle Carter. Kyle, thanks so much for joining us on this edition of Against the Current. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Keep looking at each other, gentlemen. Hold that. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Cut. Yes. I need to get a still shot real quick.
Yeah, that was good.